a little calendar, right? And it says, today is 17 days in the Omer. That is 2 weeks and 3 days. So what did I do? I counted days, I counted weeks and days. See that? 17 days, which is 2 weeks and 3 days. You can figure it out, right, Baruch? 2 weeks, 3 days, how much?
17.
Oh, not bad. On the wall. Yes, sir. So, it was supposed to do this at the beginning of the day. When does the day begin? In the evening. So we did it last night. But there is and we did it last night with a bracha. Why a bracha? Because it's a mitzvah. Anytime a bracha, anytime mitzvah, say a bracha. To identify that it's a mitzvah. For instance, if let's say you're counting the Omer. So you're counting. But people like to count all the time. Who says that's a mitzvah? Unless you identify it as a mitzvah. People put adornments on their doorposts all the time. You put a mezuzah, identify that it's a mitzvah. It's doing it for the mitzvah. People eat matzah all the time. But identifying Pesach night that you're doing it specifically for the mitzvah. So everything we do that has to be identified as a mitzvah needs a bracha. So the question is, how about the mitzvah tzedakah, which you will find in mitzvah number 38? Giving tzedakah. It says there in mitzvah 38, you shall open your hands, and the rabbis teach open twice. That's what the Torah says. You shall surely open. Doesn't mean the word surely is a bad translation of it in number 38. It's not you shall surely open your hand. You shall open your hand. That's what it says. Open. Let's say open twice. Why should you open your hand twice? Because I have more than one person needs you. Open for this person, open for that person, and of course 2 is the minimum of what we call plural. So therefore, it indicates or implies plural without limitation. And therefore, you should open once, you should open twice, you can open 10 times if you have to. And take out $1 for each person if you have to. And that's how you get stuck up. And that's how the Chavetz Chaim explains it. He puts the passage in the italics, and then he says the sages of blessed memory, that's Chazal, the Gemara, Rabbanan, they interpret it, you shall surely open it many times. Of course, we all know that the Rabbanan and the Talmud function as explanations for what the Torah teaches. In other words, when the Torah teaches, let's say, days and then weeks, the Chazal have to explain what that means, days and weeks and then days and weeks. So it's all, what the Chavetz Chaim brings down over here as an interpretation is in fact the interpretation of the Gemara 2,000 years ago, which explains to us exactly how to do a mitzvah. Now, it says over here, it says in the Torah, in Vayikra, one passage is in Dvarim, mitzvah 38, the other one's in the book of Vayikra, which says that you have a duty to sustain your brother, that he may live along with you. So it says in the Torah, you shall strengthen him and help him whatever you can, because he should live with you. Look at those words, live with you. Can you see that? He shall live with you. What does that mean, live with you? That means you got to live too. If you end up giving him all your money so that he lives and you don't, that's not fulfillment of the passage. The Torah says, live with you. That means you got to make sure you got two. In fact, you got to make sure you got you first. Because if you don't have you first, then you won't be around to give the other guy. So therefore, all by logic, we understand that whatever mitzvah stuff you do, you should do so in a way that does that guarantees your survival along with the other person. Of course, you might argue that I really have this $50,000 and I was going to give 5,000 of it to tzedakah because I have to give 10%. But you might argue that I want to buy this Mercedes and the Mercedes is 50,000 and 45,000 won't do it. So if I can't get the 5,000 tzedakah because I need the 50,000 for the Mercedes. And the answer is go buy 100. You understand? Because your needing a Mercedes does not allow you to neglect the other person. So make sure you give your 10% tzedakah. The idea of giving yourself, of course, is very, very important because we have another area of mitzvah which stipulates with yourself, and that is love your friend, love your neighbor as yourself. I mean, you gotta love yourself first. And loving yourself first, that means that if you don't take care of yourself, you won't be around to take care of the other person. Someone knocks on your door, hey, I'm poor, please help me. I didn't have dinner tonight. Can you help me? And you say to him, well, I didn't have dinner either, so I'm not gonna help you also. Love your friend as yourself. That's counterproductive. It implies love your friend as yourself implies you should make sure you have dinner. And once you have dinner, then you can concern yourself and really feel for the person's need. Now, this is a concept which applies love your friend as yourself only to Jews. In other words, it does not imply that you have to love non-Jews in the same manner. Because it says, l'reacha, to your friend. Who's your friend? Your friend who you share a common life with. Who's that? Person who shares mitzvos. So the person is doing mitzvos, and you're doing mitzvos, two Jews together, they share with each other. That's their priority of love that's how you manifest the mitzvah of loving a fellow person. It should be a fellow Jew. However, the Mishnah, the Rabbanan come along and they say that one of the ways in which you will express your connection to the Torah is by loving humanity. So of course here you see a contradiction, and of course the contradiction is hard to understand because the Rabbanan can't contradict the Torah. The Torah says fellow Jew. How could the Rabbanan come along and say everybody? And so my Rebbe Rav Noach explains as follows. He says, love your friend as yourself. That means who comes first? Yourself. And of course, that means there's a priority of love all the way down the line. For instance, you're certainly going to love your spouse more than you love some stranger, even though you're obligated to love him too. Is what we call priorities of love. Certain loves are higher than other loves. Parents, children, relatives, first cousins, second cousins, and so forth. And it goes down the list. We know, for instance, that Yaakov Avinu, married two sisters. It wasn't his plan to marry two sisters. His plan was to marry Rachel. And the wicked father-in-law gave him Leah instead. And after he woke up the next morning, it was a dark night that night, he didn't recognize her very, very well. And he said, whoa, you're the wrong girl. What are you doing here, right? So he could have easily divorced her and shamed her, but he did not. But he did want to marry the one he loved, Rachel. So he married them both. And in marrying them both, he realized a directive, especially from Hashem, that this was the destiny of both women to go to him. Because the older sister was supposed to marry the older brother. But he, of course, messed up. And he lived a very negative life of evil and wrongdoing. And so she, the older sister, was very upset. It's very upset that she would have to marry such a rotten guy. And so therefore, Hashem ordained it that Yaakov Avinu would marry both sisters. Now he's got these two wives. And it says, he loves Rachel more than Leah. Which is understandable. That's the one he wanted. What does that mean, more than Leah? It means he loved her too. Just maybe less. But he loved her too. There's no doubt that he loved her. And he learned to realize the love by virtue of that destiny. In any event, so that's where we understand love operating in gradations. So you love your family more than you love someone else's family. And you love your fellow Jew more than you love your fellow man. But it does imply by definition that you love your fellow man. It also implies that you start with yourself, your family, your people. And then by extension, it moves. If you don't start that way, then really you have no love for anybody. Imagine a person, I remember in the old days when I was growing up, it was the Vietnam War. So the Vietnam War produced a lot of craziness, people protesting the war and all that stuff. The young people were always were trying to be anti-establishment and going against their parents and all that stuff. And they tried to experiment with all sorts of drugs and stuff. And they would make this big protest, hundreds of people marching down Washington. Make peace, not war, make peace. And all this other silly stuff. And they were trying to, we love mankind. So you ask him a question. What about your father? He's an idiot. He's in the establishment. He doesn't know nothing. What about your mother? She's a drunk. She doesn't know anything. They're both stupid. But I love humanity. See the hypocrisy. The hypocrisy indicates that we should love those that are closest to you most, no matter what their situations may be. And that's why the end of the day, we say here in mitzvah number 38, you should give tzedakah even to non-Jews. It says so, but only certain kind of non-Jews. Which kind? We're very specific here. Those that keep the 7 mitzvos, b'nei Noach, the 7 Noachide laws. If you have a person who's civilized, what are the 7 Noachide laws? Don't commit murder, don't steal, don't commit adultery, right? You should believe in God, honor God's name. You should have a system of law and order to enforce these laws, and the prohibition of eating a limb from a live animal. Those are the 7 things. Even Goyim have a restriction in terms of food, not as extensive as ours, but restriction. If you knew of a certain piece of meat that came from a live animal that wasn't killed first, right, with that kind of cruelty, then you can't be friends with such a person. So, if let's say you're living in Nazi Germany, so you should not love Germans, and you should try everything you can to overthrow the government. Let's say you could if you can't, then run away, get out of town. So Germans that did stay, I don't know how they live with themselves. Well, I was only taking orders. Should have packed out. You don't take orders from a bum. You don't take orders from bad people. And so the mitzvah is to give tzedakah, but do not support someone who you know is a degenerate. So question arises, what about the homeless or the money, buy some more marijuana and alcohol? So you don't want to contribute to that. So you have to know for sure if you want to give this guy a few dollars, where he's holding in terms of his personal life to some degree anyway. Just because he's homeless doesn't necessarily mean that he's a bad guy, but you also have to at the same time make sure that he's not going to spend the money counterproductively. So that's the mitzvah of tzedakah. So the question arises, it's a mitzvah. We said all mitzvahs should be identified as such for the bracha. I'm not giving tzedakah or charity because I'm a nice person. I'm not giving charity because I'm humane or moral or any of that stuff. I'm giving it because God said so. That's the answer. Right? We talked about that. Remember that time that I had to give $10 back to the grocery store? Right? Come back to the grocery, I give her $100. She gives buy $50 worth of groceries. She gives me $60 worth of change. And I find out 10 minutes later, drive back, give her $10, and she said, "Oh, what a wonderful person you are." I said, "Absolutely. Don't even think that way. I do it because God says so. It's a mitzvah." Now, let's say I'm passing by a non-kosher pizza shop or a non-kosher butcher shop, and I go, "Ugh, non-kosher, terrible. How can you eat such junk? How can you see the butcher shop that displaying pork chops? You're not allowed to say that. There's nothing wrong with pork chops. It's a wonderful thing. It's a good thing. We should eat it. We should enjoy it. It's very healthy. We can't eat it because God said so. That's the notion of a mitzvah, that it's a commandment from the commander-in-chief. And we therefore accept his rulings specifically to us who have 613 mitzvahs rather than just the 7. Of course, we have those 7 too. We're not allowed to commit murder either. We're not allowed to steal either. not commit adultery either. But we have 606 extra. And those 606 extra are all commanded by Hashem. So let's say now that a non-Jew keeps those 7 mitzvahs, and he's a good human being, and you should love him and give him stuff and so forth. But what happens if, let's say, he does it because he's moral and humane, and not necessarily doing it for Hashem? And the answer is that's a problem. That's really a problem. If he doesn't have a recognition of God, he's not a God-fearing person, we have an issue with regards to his humanity, in regards to whether he's appropriate to help. Now, let's say non-Jews have a different religion, Christianity or Islam. Now, I'm not necessarily too much in favor of Islam, but even so, let's assume that there are some individuals that might be humane. So, if these people have this other foreign religion, of course, obviously it's forbidden for us. But does it negate necessarily their acknowledgement of God? Let's say they believe in some character who supposedly their Messiah or whatever, or Muhammad rode his donkey. So it could be when Muhammad rode his donkey on top of the donkey. But that being said, the question is, does that negate their acceptance of God? And the answer is no, because non-Jews, you see, have a right to have a sense of Hashem and add things to it, which they do. For them, it's okay. For us, it's forbidden. Why is it for us forbidden? Because it says, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Hear, Israel, Hashem is one. That means what? That means that the oneness of Hashem, the singularity of Hashem, the total dominion and sovereignty of Hashem is in fact an obligation on Yisrael, on the house of Israel, on the Jewish people. If we were to engage and walk into a church, that would be a horrible violation. Walk into a mosque, horrible violation. So of course, you know that in those violations we have many different violations that are considered by the Torah as forbidden. For instance, you're not allowed to consider another God, number one. You're not allowed to, shall we say, have in your possession a statue of any sort, or let's say deal with it or sell it, like Abraham Avihu's father was a salesman in that regard, or you're not allowed to worship it or to bow to it. Any one of those 4 violations is a singular violation unto itself. So let's say I consider it and I'm giving it some power, like I'm going to a psychic to read my fortune. So she goes through crystal ball nonsense stuff. That's a prohibition. Because you believe it's possible. Let's say you hold a rabbit foot game. That's forbidden. Because you have some power. Let's say you have these tarot cards or whatever. It's also forbidden. Even though I did nothing with them. But let's say I don't believe in them, but I did something with them. I'm in business. I'm a jeweler. Can I sell crosses? The answer is no. But I don't believe in it. I think it's nonsense. The answer is no. Let's say I don't do business with it, and I don't, and I don't believe in it, but I end up for some strange reason worshiping it. How? Oh, I had to go to the church. Why'd you go to church? Because your best friend's getting married. Which you have to do. And you walked in there and they asked everybody to kneel. Well, you weren't going to be an outcast, look different, right? So you kneel. Dum. You did a bad thing. Let's say now I don't worship you at all, but I bow to you. I don't worship, plain bow. How did that happen? Well, let's first imagine because they're walking down the street And there's the one I do the church right there, and I got $100 bill. So I can't get that $100 bill back. Of course, on the other hand, you might try this. This is the way to do it. It always works. You can get your $100 back. And so therefore, you have to be very careful with regards to explaining and understanding a righteous Gentile, a non-Jew who is accepting of 7 laws of Hashem, including the belief in Hashem and so forth, and then you have to be a good person. So the question is, it's a mitzvah, then you say bracha. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, blessed is Hashem, King of the world. Change the children, son, tziboro, that sanctified us for the mitzvahs, and told us to get stuck. But we don't do that. How come? So the answer why we don't do that is because every bracha must be followed by the action. And if it doesn't follow by the action, then you really are delaying the connection between the bracha and the mitzvah, and the identification is therefore not complete. I make a bracha, and then 5 minutes later, I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. There's no connection between the bracha and the mitzvah. So therefore, I'm just thinking that you just plain old doing it. And I don't hear the acknowledgement that it's God's command. So therefore, you have to make sure that the moment you finish the bracha, the mitzvah is done. Boom. Problem is that I went into my pocket, looking for $1, and as I found $1, $1 left. Why do you need? Just me and the cash is over there. I got here in 5. I'm only here in 1. And so I couldn't fulfill the mitzvah. I couldn't finish it. Because of the possibility that the non-Jew might leave, or anybody for that matter, any stucker that would leave and not be there because he got a better offer somewhere else, that means you can't complete the mitzvah. If the mitzvah, if your fulfillment of the mitzvah is dependent upon someone else's help or participation, you can't be guaranteed of that. You don't make the bracha. You never know. You might leave. So therefore, we have to be careful to not make the bracha where it's dependent upon others, the fulfillment of such. Now the mezuzah. I'm putting a mezuzah on the door. So putting a mezuzah on the door is not an ornament, it's a mitzvah to make a bracha. So the mitzvah of putting a mezuzah on the door is because there's 2 nails, top and bottom. You put the top one on, and the mezuzah is dangling, you put the bottom one on. So that's not mezuzah, that's no mitzvah. The mitzvah only starts when you put the bottom one on. And so therefore, you wait until you knock the first nail into the top, and then as the mezuzah is dangling, then you pick up the hammer and the nail, and then you make the bracha, and then bang it in, and you complete the mitzvah. And that's how the mitzvah is done in connection with the brachas. And so we're talking over here about the mitzvah of counting the Omer, mitzvah number 26, and the mitzvah, we say the bracha, and then we count immediately. Now, the question arises in the counting of the Omer. It's a long mitzvah. It's a 49-day mitzvah. It's not one that you can accomplish in a day or in an hour or a minute, like a mezuzah or like tzedakah. It takes 49 days to complete the mitzvah. So, how do we do it? Make a bracha at the beginning of the first day, and then count all the rest of the days without the bracha, because there's no need for the bracha. You might start the bracha, I'm done, until the end of the day, until the 49th day when I complete the mitzvah. And that's an interesting thing. Our mitzvah can engage you for a number of days or 7 weeks, as we said, and you're so busy trying to do this mitzvah each and every night, and that you have to wait until the 49th day to say I fulfilled the mitzvah. Now there's a mitzvah called to have children. So one might argue, as we said many times, that the mitzvah begins with conception and ends with delivery. Well, that's 9 months in itself. You go make a bracha on something's going to be less 9 months. So the mitzvah really of children, as we understand it, really doesn't end with delivery. In fact, it begins with delivery. That's the first moment you hold your baby. It's time for you to get to work on raising that baby. And in raising that baby and directing him and giving him a proper path in life, that's all part of the mitzvah. So how do you know when you complete the mitzvah? Well, now he's 3 years old and he's potty trained. Good job. Well, go. Now he's 5 years old, he's going to school and he's getting along with his friends. Good job. Come on. Well, let's see. I'll raise him till he's a teenager, till his bar mitzvah. By that time, he'll start rebelling against me, and my whole mitzvah is up in smoke. Right? And so, how do you complete the mitzvah of having children? So we don't make a bracha on it because it's endless, really. The continuous engagement and involvement in your children's lives to give them the proper direction. That's a lifelong thing. So one of the books we're writing about mitzvahs is called the Sefer Chinuch. He writes a very interesting novel idea. He says that the mitzvah really becomes fulfilled when you have grandchildren, because you know that you raised your child right to do the right thing, right? And you know, as we said on Thursday night, you know, those people that are not sure about not having children, and not sure about getting married, and all those other silly people, and I only want 2 kids. I only want 1.5. 1.5 children is what I want. You know? How about as many as God will grant? How about the joy of realizing that if you get anyone at all, it's thanks to God. And therefore, the idea of starting all of a sudden, well, we just got married, we're 33, and we're not ready yet for kids, so maybe in 5 years, I'm 38, I'll have children. Cuckoo birds. The reality is that persons who are mature enough to get married, and they should be by the age of 21, 22, 23. I think any of my children got married later than that. Is the reality that therefore you should be ready for children at the same time. You're ready for marriage, to live with another person, to get along with another person, but you're not ready to expand your family and to jointly work on your children. Something's off kilter. And so, therefore, you want to have the mitzvah of having children ASAP, and the mitzvah is then to direct them and teach them and help them and guide them and give them the love that you can to make them feel important and special so that they want to do the same for their children. And then when you have grandchildren, you fulfill the mitzvah. And so this idea, therefore, can't have a bracha. It's endless, really. And when you have this kind of sense of length, it's really hard to make a bracha. So we're going to make this bracha in the canon. The Omen is 49 days. Okay, agreed, it's not 9 months. Agreed, it's not a lifetime, but it's 49 days. How do you wait for 49 days to make the bracha? Or you make the bracha at the beginning, and then you wait for 49 days for the mitzvah to end. And so the interesting thing about this whole thing is that there is, of course, we said the mitzvah is counting weeks and days. I should say days and weeks and days. 17 days, 2 weeks, 3 days, the proper way to do it, which is today. And in so doing, there's also this realization that the mitzvah is performed 49 times. Let's say somewhere along the line, you forget. You counted 40 days, and the 41st day you forgot. Well, there goes the mitzvah up in smoke. And that's true, because the mitzvah is 49 days. So you got to be on your toes every night. So every night I say the bracha. Today is 17 days, 2 weeks, 3 days, and so forth. So I have a little handy thing right by my desk to make sure I don't forget, And one night I did forget. But the next morning, I remembered that I forgot. That's a cute one. I remember that I forgot. I remember that I forgot. So, can I count? Yes, still the same day, but without a bracha. Don't say the bracha. The bracha can only be at night. But now that I count 17 days, today without the bracha, 17 days, 2 weeks, 2 days, I can now resume at night saying the bracha. But if I forget a whole day, I can't say the bracha anymore because the mitzvah is incomplete. And the question arises amongst the scholars: is it of these 49 days one mitzvah or 49 separate mitzvahs? And the answer is it's not completely answered. The dispute rages. In other words, they're both opinions, and you have to consider both opinions. It could be one mitzvah, it could be 49. So you don't know. So in case it's 49, you're going to say a bracha every night. But in case it's one and you forget, then no longer a bracha.
So according to the opinion, it's 49 if you mess up and miss it. You make a bracha.
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Yeah, of course. That's a good thing.
We don't hold that.
We hold to the strictness of both. In other words, it is 49 days to the extent that you should make a bracha each and every night, but it's one to the extent where if you miss, you're done. You get it?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Now, during these days of 49 days, we are very, very heavily involved in preparation for the next holiday coming up. We know that the word Sheva means seven. Seven. The word Sheva means seven. And there are 7 days in a week. So how do you say a week in Hebrew? If Sheva is 7, then a week is Shavua. Every Saturday night you eat each other, Shavua Tov, correct? Okay. These 7 days of the week is what we require to count, besides the days. So if we count 7 weeks, the Torah calls it Shiva Shavuot, 7 weeks, the word Shavuot in plural. And we all know that we reach the holiday that on the 50th day, and that holiday is called Shavuot, because it's really the festival of the weeks, of the counting of the weeks. And so it's called the Shavuot. But it also has some other very important descriptions as well. A great moment in history occurred on Shavuot, and that was the Matan Torah, the giving of the Torah. So now you have this incredible, most earth-shattering, most decisive moment in human history. The Almighty gives the Torah. The Almighty connects with mankind. The Almighty connects through the Jewish people to mankind. And He gives them the law. 7 for the Goyim and 606, 613 for us. And He gives directives. In other words, at the end of the day, our understanding of God is really simply His directives. Because we know what's right, because we understand what He's teaching us and what we need to do. Therefore, our connection with Him postulates and makes it axiomatic in our minds of His absolute truth and existence. And so this moment in Jewish history of the giving of the Torah was the affirmation of the Almighty who created the world, and of the Almighty who selected the Jewish people and took them out of Egypt, and of the Almighty who then said, you people are special, you get my directives, you get the Torah. And this became the backbone of civilization and the backbone of mankind. This was the greatest moment in history. When God actually manifested Himself and revealed Himself. So how do we know this is all true? So we know it's true because 5 million people testified. And they all can't be wrong. 5 million people said they heard the voice of God. And these 5 million people were the Jewish people at Mount Sinai. And it is so written in the Torah that was given at Mount Sinai on that time, 600,000 men with an equal number of women, and of course, each one having 6 children, as we learned in the story of Egypt. And what the elderly altogether was a composite, a fair assumption of 5 million people. And that's written. And through the years, this document, which contains this fact, has been passed on from generation to generation, from children, parents to children, from rabbis to teachers to students, all the way on, over and over and over again, all these years, 3,500 years of an absolute acceptance of this fact. And I'm here today standing in front of you to bear witness that it's true. How do I know? Well, my father and rabbis taught me. Whose father and rabbis taught them? Whose fathers and rabbis taught them? All the way back to 3,500 years ago to Mount Sinai. So we've got a grasp on truth in which we are so convinced that it's right that we're prepared to give our lives for it. And when Christians and Islamists try to change us and maybe adopt a new religion, Christians certainly tried that in the Middle Ages, we were ready to die before we would give it up. Because once you know something is real, something is true, it's bigger than your life. But nowadays, we're not obligated, thank God, to give our lives because we live in a relatively free society, a relatively humane society. So there are other places in the world that aren't so humane, like America. But we are obligated to give our lives for God and for this truth in another way. To live it. Not to die for it, but to live it. That means that every day, every morning, every afternoon, every evening, I am prepared to do what I have to do to fulfill these 613 mitzvahs, to live this life, to live this truth. And that's giving your life for Hashem and for the Torah. And so this great moment in Jewish history, the holiday of Shavuot, unfortunately and tragically, is not as popular as the holiday of Pesach. Everybody celebrates Pesach, right? There isn't a Jew in Israel that doesn't have matzahs on Pesach. But the Esther, the same Jew, you know about the holiday of Shavuot? Never heard of it.
Studied though all night.
Oh, that's what you're supposed to do. You're a Scott. You're the guy behind you. But I never heard of Shavuot. What's that? That's what we did. Cheese day. So, unfortunately, you have this ignorance, which of course ignores the most important part of life, the giving of the Torah, the presence of the Bible, and even the whole world recognizes it. Even foreign religions base themselves upon it, and yet our own fellow Jews sometimes are not aware of this great holiday. And so Shavuos should be celebrated with as much gusto as Pesach. So you want to stay up all night to learn. So our custom is to do that. We restrict sleep. We do not sleep. We don't sleep at night. You can take a good nap in the early afternoon if you want. Give yourself strength, and you stay up all night, and you learn Torah. And there are classes and there are learning partners, and we find out, of course, the most beautiful thing, which I mentioned before, that we are the only religion in the world that demands education, knowledge, awareness, teaching, learning. No other religion requires that. Just have faith and be done. We know that that's not true with us. The faith has to be based upon an awareness, understanding, using the most valuable gift we have. Not our noses, not our ears, but our brains. And then to have them confirmed by our hearts. To follow the heart by itself is to play guesswork. I'm not sure, but if you use your head and you realize the truth, then you try to confirm it and actualize it. So we gave an example Thursday night. We're going to teach a little boy that it said 5 plus 5 is 10. He tries it out. 5 plus 5 is 10. 5 plus 5 is 10. 10 minus 5 is 5. And it all makes sense. But to actualize it and sense that it's true, we send him to the store with $10, ask him to buy a $5 item, see what happens. He gets $5 back. Wow. Wow, he says. That means it's true. And that's the whole idea of learning. Learning is not only that makes sense, but you know ultimately that it's a truth. And this is the kind of learning that we try to do with our Torah. And this is when we celebrate it on Shavuos. Now, Shavuos is 49 days connected to Pesach. So you got to know that even though there's a 49-day delay, nevertheless, it's an extension of Pesach. Because why? Because freedom without direction, freedom without knowledge, is chaos. That's not what Hashem meant when he took the Jews out of Egypt. When the Jews took the Jews out of Egypt, Hashem meant, no longer are you slaves to any people, not to Pharaoh, not to anybody else. You're slaves to me. Which means that being enslaved to God means that you're free of any possible human domination whatsoever. No one can ever tell you what to do. Not even yourself, because you're human. And you want something above the human experience. You want the divine. You want Hashem, the creator, to tell you what's really true. And that's why the climax of Pesach is this holiday Shavuos. So why the 49 delay then? 49-day delay. Why are we delayed? Why are we? And we're counting with anticipation to get to Mount Sinai. Why are we delayed? The answer is because we weren't ready for it. We weren't ready for it because we were entrenched in the 49 levels of impurity and idolatry and depravity that was Egypt. And therefore, we needed to emerge out of that. Hashem needed to take not the Jews out of Egypt, but the Egypt out of the Jews. And leave behind all that garbage and that nonsense and that sickness and that evil. A culture that would enslave another human being. A religion that would enslave another human being. Oh, get out of it. And it took 49 days to remove 49 levels of impurity. And the number 49, of course, is a multiple of 7, because 7 is a very important magic number in God's world, because 7 days is the creation, 7 days is the Shabbos. And so therefore, when you multiple 7 squared, then you've got these 49 days, and that was 49 levels of impurity in which you want to remove them so that you can ascend to 49 levels of wisdom. And so therefore, the concept of these 49 days is so special in terms of preparation. What are we doing to prepare ourselves, to improve ourselves, to become more receptive to the Torah and more open-minded to the teachings of Hashem and His truth? We got to build up our character, because at the end of the day, people don't reject God because of an intellectual reason. They reject it because of a character flaw. People accept God because their character is refined, and a refined character can accept and hear open-mindedly a truth. What is the closed-mindedness of a person that this allows him to hear this kind of truth? And the answer is an idolatry called self. Ego. I worship me. I know everything. That doesn't make sense to me. That's stupid. Well, listen, it doesn't make sense to me how to operate a computer. It doesn't make the computer stupid. It makes me stupid. You don't understand God. You understand? That means there's something wrong with you, not with God. Just open your mind, be willing to hear information that may be very new to you. Well, it was very new and very foreign to us when we got out of Egypt. We spent 210 years of Egypt learning every garbage stone of mankind. We're here in America learning a whole lot more garbage. Right? On the internet, on the computer, on the telephone, right? All these horrible devices that teach you, pop up with the most disgusting and ridiculous ideas. And we know that we need to be free of that. We need to be open, create a vacuum within us so that we can be receptive to hear something. Yeah, that makes sense. Let's try. Let's hear that. And so therefore, that's what these 49 days are all about. Cleansing ourselves. So we cleanse ourselves with 7 characteristics, each one for a week. 1 week we work on this characteristic. Next week we work on another behavior trait. Third, on another level of refinement, and so forth. And these are the 7. Number 1, bottom line, chesed, kindness. Bottom line, kindness, sense of other people around you, a sense of sensitivity, compassion. This is attributed to a great hero in our history. Who's this great hero? Abraham Avinu, Abraham Alpha. Then we have another thing called strength, and discipline, and inner power, and ability to refrain from temptation and nonsense. That inner strength, which builds up boundaries, is called gevura, which is the quality of Yitzchak Avinu, Isaac, our second patriarch. Then the third one, which is the week we're in right now, is called Tiferes, or glory. The glory of this is Yaakov, the Torah. It is the Torah and the Torah learning and the Torah experience and the experience of mining the depths of God's wisdom and connecting to God's truth and understanding deep in our minds and our hearts where reality is, that it really almost sort of combines kindness and strength. Sometimes you'll find that kindness and strength do not reside in the same person. The person's very kind. He's not really that strict on things. The person's very strict on things. Maybe he's not so kind. The answer is to learn a balance. And to learn that balance, which is important to learn about this with children, and this balance lies in the study and the intellectual pursuit of learning. The fourth level is called Netzach. Netzach means eternity, that you're going to achieve this within your life, not only for the rest of your life, but for your children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren.
It's like the seven lower counting pretty much.
So what?
The seven still or the lower seven still?
Yeah, but we're telling you, so I'm number 4 now. So Netzach, who was the hero that embodied Netzach?
Seven.
Moshe Rabbeinu. Moses, our teacher, Moshe Rabbeinu was the one that provided the world with a sense of eternity. He went up to Mount Sinai, got the Torah, brought it down, and it's forever. And you can never forget Moshe Rabbeinu's name. Mentioned 100,000 times a day.
Rabbi, but sometimes it's translated as victory.
Well, victory, I think eternity is a victory. I mean, if you're going to win, for instance, you're going to lose tomorrow. Right? I mean, this year,
But what is the
this year,
literal
this team
meaning?
was, this year, this team was the World Series, won the World Series. The Yankees won the World Series. I can't remember when, but whenever they won it, right? And the next year, they're going to win it again. So what good was it?
Victory forever.
What's the literal meaning, right? Look, the
Victory.
days up.
Victory forever.
And it's up.
And that means that forever is the pshat what? Eternity. This world, the next world, right? Forever and ever. And so that's Moshe Rabbeinu, who, as the greatest man that ever lived, brought this message and brought this opportunity of eternity for all mankind. So now we come to the next one. Next one, of the 5th week, is called Hod. Hod is a certain majesty. And this majesty belonged to a great hero named Aaron HaKohen. Aaron HaKohen was the high priest who was Moshe Rabbeinu's brother, and he did not have the political leadership for the Jewish people, but he had instead the religious leadership for the Jewish people. He served in the base of Mikdash. He served in the temple. He brought the sacrifice. He did the service. And he did it clothed with 8 special holy garments. And he did it in a manner that displayed a certain majesty of service. Somewhat similar in a smaller way to what we feel when we walk into a synagogue. Walk into a shul, we feel like, wow, there's a place to stop. You walk in and you see the Torah, and you see the connection and the whole spiritual buildup of what it means there. It's really a sense of spiritual majesty that Aaron HaKohen brought to us. And that's what you work on the 5th week. And then that whole week you work on yourself, to build yourself up to become kind, strong, learning, filled with a giving off of yourself for eternity and for developing within yourself and your own character a certain majesty, certain religious spirituality, so to speak. Number 6. That's Yesod.
It must be yours.
What is Yesod? Yesod is the foundation of it all. You don't get to the foundation till you get past these 5 steps. This foundation worked in the 6th week is the foundation that enables a person to have the strength and the base on which he can operate to deny and run away from any temptation. There's no and of course temptation is an interesting thing. Even in the most refined character, temptation lurks. Yosef Atzadik is the embodiment of this. Who's Yosef Atzadik? Yosef is a man who learned 17 years with his father Torah every day. And now he's sent, unfortunately, tragically abducted and kidnapped and sent into Egypt. And he's tempted by this woman. And the temptation is horrible because the woman is his master's wife. And his temptation is so strong, it's overwhelming, he can't resist. Despite all those years of learning, all those years of piety, all those years of holiness, he can succumb and say. And so he realizes what's going on, and he's about ready to give in, and he sees a picture of his father, who was learning for 17 years, and he realizes a sense of what he's doing and how horrible it is, that he's going to overturn and destroy everything he's accomplished. And when he realizes that, he runs out. But as he runs out, she grabs his coat. Now, she says to him, you leave this coat here. You know, woman's sperm, watch out for her. Right? I got this coat, I'm going to accuse you of rape. He says, I don't care what you do, I'm out of here. I don't care about the coat. And out he goes. That's what she accuses. And of course, he sits in prison for 10 years. But it's better to sit in prison for 10 years than to have to succumb to a horrible mistake, which would overturn all those other 5 beautiful qualities. And so Joseph, the tzaddik, the righteous, is called righteous because a righteous man can say no to wrongdoing and cannot be tempted, even though he's sitting in the midst of a business deal that could make him $50,000, $100,000 if it just makes a little bit different in his honesty, in his presentation of the product. $2,000. You have to say everything. Is there an honesty issue? Or is there God watching? And so, therefore, you have to have that kind of, that last character. And the last characteristic, number 7 for the 7th week, is a characteristic that leads you up to the holiday of Shavuos. And that's the characteristic called Malchus, kingdom, royalty. And the reason it's called that is because when you come to Shavuos and the Almighty gives the Torah and presents himself at Mount Sinai in the Revelation at that moment, you sense the absolute royalty, majesty, sovereignty of the Almighty singular God. He's the most. Not 2, not 3, not 4, not 5, one God, one master, one creator. And when you connect with the king, then you understand what it means to be a king. And that in your own life, you act like a king. King over yourself, king over the people that you can help, king over the people that you can direct or guide or teach. That kingship is a kingship of royalty that was embodied in the kings of Israel when the kings were established. The kingdom was established in the biblical times. And who was the most popular and most definitive king of all? David HaMelech, King David. And David HaMelech was born on the holiday of Shavuos. And that's why you're connecting to his Malchus. But let's sing the song to David. David, Melech Israel, Chai, Chai, V'Kayam. What does it mean, Chai, V'Kayam? Alive and forever. Who will ever forget King David? King David represented the ability to have enormous power and to use it with generosity and benevolence, and to use it with sweetness and kindness. This was King David. And so David HaMelech, King David, is the man who is the holiday of Shavuos, and that's how we conclude this mitzvah, counting the Omer, and go right into the holiday of Shavuos. But once again, we say that Shavuos is the climax to Pesach because the freedom of Pesach is incomplete without the direction of our future within our emancipation, and that direction is Hashem and in servitude to Hashem. Now we know where we're going. Now we know what we're doing. We got rid of the junk, we're rid of the falsification, we're into truth, we're into Hashem. This is what going out of Egypt really meant. So if that's the case, now we leave Egypt and we celebrate for 7 days, and then we count 49 to Shavuos, the conclusion. How many days is Shavuos? 1 in Israel, 2 outside of Israel. How come it's not 7 days? Why not like Pesach? Imagine this: 7 days of Pesach, we couldn't eat bread. 7 days of Pesach, we were restricted in our diet. Imagine 7 days of Shavuos, get anything we want. The answer is because, you see, Shavuos is really not a holiday unto its own. It's really the 8th day of Pesach. That's what you have to understand. Now, it is a holiday of its own to the extent where you have to make a separate trip to Jerusalem. Because all of these 3 major festivals, you have to make a trip to Yerushalayim. Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot. And so, as you're making this trip, each one, so 49 days later, you had to go back home and then come back and come back to Yerushalayim. So it's a separate yom. But in fact, it is a conclusion to Pesach. Now, we all know that there's a third holiday in this system, and that's the holiday of Sukkot. Pesach, Shavuot, Sukkot, those are the 3 holidays of Liyal Regel that you must make a pilgrimage to Yerushalayim and walk. The moment you get into the city, it's time to walk. You walk towards the Beis Hamikdash, walk towards the temple in the middle of the city. And so, this is, and that's part of the celebration, just making that trip. Of course, the celebration also includes no work. The celebration includes festive meals, includes clothing. We said, how do you, the simcha, the joy of Yom Tov, how do you celebrate Yom Tov? How do you make happiness? So we said how the Rambam said it. Food for the men, clothing for the women, and candies for the kids. That's how you make Yom Tov, right? Everybody's different. The men like food, the women like clothing. And the kids love candy. And everyone should get their own, thing to make their Yom Tov experience joyous. So Shavuos is just as much a Yom Tov as Pesach in that regard, with regards to the pilgrimage, to the good food, to the good clothing, to the no work, and bringing special sacrifices in the temple and so forth. And so the third holiday is called Sukkot. Now this holiday of Sukkot is in celebration of not leaving Egypt. We did that, Pesach. Not receiving the Torah, we got that done, we did Shavuot. So what are we celebrating when it comes to Sukkot? We're celebrating the fact that God took care of us in the desert until we got home to Israel. And how did he do it? So there's a dispute. Some say it was clouds of glory, others say it was also flimsily built huts called Sukkos, and some say it was both. But that's how we understand our travel in the desert. You ever traveled in the desert 40 years? First question is water. So she made a miracle. Moshe Rabbeinu hit the rock. Now comes water. What a phenomenal mitzvah. What a phenomenal miracle. Delicious water coming out of a rock. You think that's something? You think that's a big miracle? Watch this one. I'm in a park playing ball, and I got all sweated up. So I go to this water fountain. It's just like a rock to me. I press a button, bang, out comes water. the water wouldn't come out, they'd be upset. Right? Miracles. But then again, food. So the Almighty brought a miracle and brought food coming down from heaven. Right? You think that's a miracle? Watch this one. I put a little seed in the ground, cover it up a little bit there, fertilize it. Now, 6 months later, I've got apples. Any less a miracle? Same thing. The Almighty's working. Sometimes in the front of the scenes, sometimes behind the scenes. But it's Him that's doing it. And so, all these things took care of us in the desert. But of course, one of the big things, we needed protection from the elements. Could you imagine if there was a big tornado or a rainstorm or whatever? And guess what? We sat in these little flimsy huts and we looked at them. Nothing harmless. Maybe it was an earthquake. Our huts were stable. Anyway, so we were in these little huts and we celebrated. Now, how can you pick the right date to celebrate Sukkot if it took place every day for 40 years? I can pick the day we left Egypt. I can pick the day God gave the Torah. I got them picked, choice. But how do I pick a day to celebrate something that happened in 40 years straight? The answer is, we pick a date in which we connected to Pesach. Everything was back to Pesach. Shavuot was back to Pesach. We got out of Egypt, then we got the Torah. Sukkot, we got out of Egypt, we're in the desert. How do you connect Sukkot to Pesach? By establishing a holiday 6 months apart to the date. In other words, equidistant in the calendar. The 15th of Nisan is Pesach. The 15th of Tishrei is Sukkot. 6 months apart. During these 6 months apart, we understand, it's a symbolic traveling through the desert. Now we come to Sukkot, and the 15th of Tishrei, the Sukkot, is a celebration of being in the desert. And we celebrate Sukkot 7 days. Why? Because we want to parallel it to Pesach. Just like Pesach, 7 days. Sukkot is a continuum, as a spiritual continuum of Pesach, is also 7 days. But then, Pesach had this climax called the giving of the Torah 49 days later. Sukkot has another climax, its own. And that climax is 1 day later. And that's also celebrating Torah. What's it called? Simchas Torah. So now we got these 2 holidays called Torah holidays. We got Shavuot, we got Simchas Torah. Shavuot is the giving of the Torah. Simchas Torah is a celebration of Torah. On Shavuot we learn, on Simchas Torah we dance. What's the difference? Well, when you first get the gift, you don't know what it is. So what do? So what you do is you open a gift wrap. Open a box. And you find out what the gift is. Now you find out what the gift is. Whoa, let's celebrate. And we dance. So the conclusion of Shavuos is the Torah learning. The conclusion of Sukkot is the conclusion of Pesach is the Torah learning of Shavuot. The conclusion to Sukkot is the Torah dancing of Sukkot. And in this way, the holidays are very parallel. And they both Pesach and Sukkot contain eating restrictions. What's the eating restriction of Pesach? Cummings. Turn your whole kitchen over. Turn your whole, turn the house over. Get rid of all the chametz. Burn out your oven. Make sure it's kosher. And then Sukkot has another eating restriction, which is eating in the sukkah. So eating in the sukkah is a very interesting experience. If you've never done it, I'm sure you want to try it once. It's a lot of fun. I know the kids love it a lot, right? Some of us also sleep in the sukkah. Now, I tried it for many years, but then I found out there was a possum loose in my neighborhood. So I was a little nervous. True story. I didn't want a possum coming over me, So a couple of years I didn't do that. Lately, I haven't been able to do it. But mostly it's really a great custom to do. Because the Sukkot issue is an issue not just of eating in it, living in it. Every free moment you should be in a sukkah. Learning, thinking, pondering, socializing, eating a meal, and sleeping. So you only go out to go to shul. So once again, we see this parallel of celebrating all of our holidays, all as a result of Hashem taking us out of Egypt. We also said that there are 4 cups of wine on Pesach for the 4 levels of redemption. What are the 4 steps of becoming free? Number 1, stop burdening us to suffer more. And Hashem stopped that. So we drink a cup of wine for that. We were delighted. Imagine, let's say, the slaves in the Deep South in 1850. And the new rule came in, a constitutional rule. You can keep your slaves, but you can't beat them. If you beat them, we'll give you a ticket. And furthermore, if you do, more than once, we'll send you to prison. Boy, so the slaves would be delighted. Yay, thank God. Right? But the Almighty said, there's more to go. Don't be satisfied with mediocrity. My Rebbe used to say, you prayed to God for $1 million? Why don't you pray for 2? He's loaded up there. plenty to go around. So obviously Hashem made the next step. They can't control you at all. They can't ask you to do anything. So imagine now in 1855, a new rule came constitutional that says you can keep the slaves, but they can't do any work for you unless you pay them. Whoa, that's amazing, right? Second step. Third step is if a slave wants to leave the plantation, he's free to go. Get out of Egypt. All 3 are different steps in experiencing how beautiful the freedom is. But there's more to come. Because now that you're free to leave the plantation, guess what? You can go to school, you can go to college, you can get a job, you can be self-employed, you can live a good life. You can get Torah and be your own person. And that's the 4th step. But the interesting thing about that 4th step is that 4th step, which is the giving of the Torah, which we drink a cup of wine for on Pesach, didn't happen until Shavuos later on. And that's because of the 49-day delay. Had it not been for that, we would have had Shavuos the day after Pesach. But we just weren't ready. But the conclusion of Pesach, the 4th cup, is Shavuos, the giving of the Torah. But then, guess what? There's a 5th cup. Anybody know what the 5th cup is? We don't drink it though. 5th cup is only on Navi. How come he drinks it, not us? Because it's referring to a 5th step of emancipation. Get to your own homeland. Get to your country. Get to Israel. And that 5th step we don't drink today because we're not in Israel. But that 5th cup is drunk by Eliyahu, which we hope will come, open the door for him, and maybe he'll bring us home to Eretz Israel. In the meantime, we celebrate a holiday called Sukkot, in which we celebrate our journey through the desert on the way to Israel. Now it becomes all fits into shape. And that all of these things return back to Pesach. So now, if you take a look at the mitzvah book, you will see mitzvah number 21, which is the mitzvah of rejoicing on the holidays. Now, it's a long discussion. We're not going to discuss it today. We're out of time, but here's what we'll discuss next Sunday. How do you rejoice on a holiday? We talked a little bit about it. Food, clothing, candies, but there's a whole idea of how to really make a simcha, how to really make it an elative experience. You've never had an experience of enjoying a yontif, you don't know what happiness is. And now we go to the specifics. 22. You should eliminate chometz on the 14th day of Nisan, the day before Pesach, to prepare for Pesach. Therefore, mitzvah 23, you should eat matzah on the first night of Pesach. So we do now with the first holiday, the holiday of Pesach. Now that we are going on celebrating Pesach, number 24, besides eating matzah on Pesach, you also got to tell the story of the departure. Mitzvah number 25, you should rest from work on the first day of Pesach and make it into a full-fledged holiday, Yom Tov. Number 26, now you got to start counting the Omer. Also connected to Pesach, as we said, because it connects to the Shavuos. Number 27, there's another day to rest from work, and that's the 7th day of Pesach, the conclusion. And why? Because that day was the completion of our departure from Egypt by virtue of the splitting of the sea and the drowning of the Egyptians. Number 28, let's go to the next holiday. Choice. No work. Now 29 and 30, 31, 32, and 33 all digress into a different set of holidays called the Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur system. We will not cover that today, so skip. Go to 34. No work on Sukkot, the first day. Number 35, sit in the Sukkot. Number 36, wave the 4 species of Sukkot, which we'll talk about at great length later on. Number 37, do not do work on the last day of Sukkot, which really is not Sukkot at all, but the 8th day, Atzeret. So remember once again, Pesach 7 plus Shavuot, and Sukkot 7 plus Shemini Atzeret, and the celebration of the holiday of Simchas Torah. What we find out from here is that how many days, let's go back now and find how many days you can't work. Let's go back to number 24. No, 25, sorry. On the first day, number 25, you can't go to work on the first day of Pesach. Everybody knows that outside of Israel, that means 2 days. Okay, let's go now to mitzvah number 27. You can't work on the 7th day of Pesach. Everybody knows that's 2 days, 7th and 8th. So that's 4 days. On number 28, you can't go to work on Shavuot, which is 2 days outside of Israel. That's 6. Is that correct? Now, just for information purposes, number 29, you can't go to work on Rosh Hashanah, and that's 2 days. So that's how much now? 8, right? And number 31, you can't do work on Yom Kippur. So that's 9, correct? Now we go to Sukkot on 34. The first day of Sukkot becomes 2 days. So that's 11. And then the last day of Sukkot, which is number 37, which is Shemini Atzeret, so is another 2 that can't be done. How many days total? So you go to your employer and you say, one second. You go to your employer and you say, you hired me for the job. You think I'm quite capable, and I'm really honored by it, and I'm anxious to work for you and do the best job available. And I'm quite talented and capable. But I do have to take off 13 days. Of course, the guy says, well, I heard of Rosh Hashanah. I know that one. I heard of Passover. I heard that one. How many holidays you guys got? And that's only counting the days we can't work. There's a whole bunch more after that. But we can work on them. Now, you want to say to me, if you want to work 13 days, maybe you have to take, the employer doesn't want to be anti-Semitic. So he says, well, I'll let you take those 13 days off, but they got to be your vacation days. So you stop. You got to take them. Many religious Jews have their vacation days and the holidays. Maybe they don't take a whole lot of vacation with their kids, but they have holidays with their kids. So you got to know. And when I'm telling you this was a reality 75 years ago. In the 1950s, most people who got a good job wanted advancement and did not come in to work on Saturday, got a pink slip on Monday. No fault of their own. And listen, I got a business to run. I'm not anti-Semitic, I'm not against your religion, but I got a business to run. You want to take off Saturday? Okay, Saturday, Sunday, I understand. And you say to him, listen, sir, I'll be glad to work for your company on Sunday if I have to, because but I can't work on Saturday. It's non-negotiable. Can you call the rabbi for dispensation? Well, if you got $50,000, I might think about it. So you can't do that either. It's not the Christian religion where you can play games. This is reality. You can't work on Shabbat. It's non-negotiable. Tragedy, most people that succumbed and gave in back in 1950 worked on Shabbat. Their children really got a bad experience of growing up without a Shabbat. Many of them married non-Jews and left our people. Sad situation, all because of Shabbat. And the holidays are just the same, nearly. And so you got to tell your boss, I can't work 13 days. That's it. sir, I'll come in Thanksgiving Day. I'll come in New Year's Day. I'll come in December 25th. I'll come in Memorial Day. Whatever you want. I'll get the job done. But I can't come in on my 13 holiday, 13 days of holidays. And this is what you really need to understand as experiencing the Jewish calendar. And so we'll stop over here. I want everyone to try and remember to memorize all 12 months in Hebrew. How many people know the 12 months in Hebrew? Okay, make sure you know. I don't want Israeli.
The song.
Oh, watch out, this is Israeli. Watch out. Anyway, 12, you need to know the 12 months. You need to know where they start from, which is Nisan, and you need to know what holidays in each and every month. We'll study it over from the book, and we'll see you all first. And I can partially do it for coming.
All right, Rabbi. See ya. Love ya. See you next
Bye,
week.
Rabbi.
Goodbye, Suzanne.
Call me.